Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 3 committee meetings tonight. We have the Police Committee meeting, a Grants and Community Development Committee meeting, and a Sustainability Committee meeting. And we will start with our Police Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have one item on the Police Committee agenda tonight, but before we reach that, I do have an announcement which I'll read, which is the Lower Merion Community Watch will be sponsoring a dog walker watch training session on Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m. at the Ardmore Fieldhouse on Greenfield Avenue. Dog Walker Watch is an awareness program coordinated by Lower Merion Community Watch and the Lower Merion Police Department. The program encourages community members to assist local law enforcement by lending extra ears and eyes, I assume including your dog's ears and eyes, while walking their dog. Dog Walker Watch increases the partnership between the police and the community, provides resources for neighbors to be more aware and effectively observe and report suspicious activity. You can visit lmcommunitywatch.org for more information and register. It sounds like a terrific program. I know in my neighborhood, everybody has dogs, everybody walks their dogs. I truly believe that people walking their dogs help keep the neighborhood safer, and this is a way to sort of make it more systematic. So with that, our substantive item has to do with authorization to enter into a lease agreement for municipal parking lot. I think this is a fairly routine matter. Our Director of Parking Services, Jerry Adams, is available if there are questions. But as it's similar to ones we've entered into in the past, if any of the commissioners wish to hear from Director Adams, he's available and can do a presentation, or I can put it out as a motion and we can consider it. As again, it's option 2. So I'm going to put the motion out that we consider for a recommendation of the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Manager to enter into an agreement with Herbert Yentis and Company to renew the lease for municipal lot number 18, Central Marion, Kinwood, located at 334-348 Montgomery Avenue, Marion, such lease to expire October 31st, 2028. Do I have a second? Thank you, President Sinai. Any commissioner comments or questions? Again, it's a renewable lease. It's the parking area near Jaime's and the Warwick Sunoco station. So, Commissioner Zalf?
Thanks, Commissioner McComb. Jerry, thanks for your memo. I'm just pleased to see the sentence that says we'll have a net gain after factoring in all expenses and revenues. So this is revenue exceeds expense today, and it will after this.
That's for the entire parking revenue in general, not simply for this lot.
I thought you were referring to this lot.
No.
I do know that that's, at least in the budget, that's the case.
Yeah, this lot is not a moneymaker for the township. We spend quite a bit on the lease to keep this open for the community of Bala and Marion, but it is not a lot that makes the township money. It is, in general, this does not impact the parking services revenue.
Does the lot break even?
No.
All right, thank you.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? Jody, is there anybody in the room have any comments or questions? Anybody online? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor, please raise their hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously, and President Time, that concludes the business of the Police Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. That was very speedy. We are on to the Grants and Community Development Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you so much, President Sinai. And wow, 6 minutes early. That's good. I'll go 6 minutes slower.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Grants and Community Development Committee meeting. We have 3 agenda items this evening. The first is to discuss and vote on a resolution to amend a regulation of our residential rehabilitation program. And the next 2 are fairly routine waiver requests for as a part of our housing rehabilitation program. So, Ms. Crane, if you wouldn't mind coming up to discuss the resolution, and then I will make a motion after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I am bringing 3 items to you tonight, as Commissioner O'Neill just mentioned. The first item is the request for the board to approve a resolution to amend the residential rehabilitation program regulations. The current regulations have been in place since 2010, and for the most part, the regulations are staying as they are, but the proposed changes before you tonight are as follows. The first 2 are increases to both the spending and asset limits. The third is an amendment to the guidelines on permanent liens. And the fourth is an addition of language to allow the sewer lien regulation to be waived at a staff level in the case of an emergency. So the first one is the spending limit. At this time, the regulation states that any project over the amount of $50,000 needs board approval to move ahead. The request to change the limit is to, the request is to change the limit to $75,000. The simple reason for requesting this change is the increase in construction costs. $50,000 does not buy the same amount of work as it did in 2010, and hopefully this change will reduce the number of times that I have to come before you to ask you to waive the limit. Later tonight, I'm going to ask you to waive the spending limits on 2 projects. And I have 2 other projects, just as an example, in the works right now that I would need to request a waiver for at the $50,000 limit, but I will not need to come to you at the $75,000 limit. So that's part of the reason for the change. The second item is asset limits. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Yeah? Okay. This is a request to increase by approximately 25% the asset limits residents need to meet to qualify for the program. There's been a couple of times in the last couple of years when a resident has not qualified for the program because they've had a little bit too much assets in the form of retirement funds. The way we handle retirement savings in this program is that if the account is providing income at the time, if they're over 62 and is providing income, it's counted as income. But if they're under 62, then it's considered an asset. So the thought is that when someone's living on a moderate income and has been able to put away a modest retirement account, we'd prefer not to have that keep them from being on the program, be able to make use of the program. And just as a note, I've not had anyone who's applied for the program and has been over the asset limit because they've had too much in a bank account or an investment account, only the retirement account. The third issue is about permanent liens. Before 2010, all money that was spent on the program, whether it was $25,000 or more, it was all part of a declining balance lien. When the regulations were redone in 2010, they added the regulation about anything spent over $25,000 becoming a permanent lien. Right now, the regulation states that applicants who are reapplying for the program when they already have a permanent lien in place are allowed to be on the program again, but they're limited to an additional $25,000 of spending. And at this point, we're simply trying to request language saying that the $25,000 that they're allowed to spend will become part of another permanent lien, as opposed to another declining balance lien. So it's just adding to the permanent lien. It's adding another permanent lien. And the last issue is one that you all actually asked me for a couple of years ago. According to the current regulations, again, a resident is ineligible for the program if they have any federal, state, county, or other municipal liens against the property. There were several times during COVID, or maybe just before, I can't remember, when I had to come to you to request a waiver of this regulation in the case of an emergency. I think 2 were heaters and 1 was a bathroom. This change simply adds that in the case of an emergency, the decision to waive this regulation can be made at a staff level so that we can move more quickly in the case of an emergency. As one of you pointed out, you're unlikely to ever say no to an emergency in the dead of winter, so this will move this along more quickly. So those are the four changed items on agenda item number 1.
Thank you so much. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Emily about the 4 changes? Any questions from members of the audience in person or online? No? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Churchill. Not whatever, hardly.
I just have a question. How many people are going to be affected by, you said that this one item with $25,000, that they would be eligible to apply for another $25,000, and it would go to a permanent lien. How many people have been rejected because we don't have this amendment?
Nobody's been rejected actually yet, but we do have cases where we do have, we're just, how do I answer that? Nobody's been rejected so far, but we want to make that additional. I have come to you before. Basically, it requires me coming to you to waive it again. Everything we can do, I don't want to say we can do anything we want, but we can do all these things as long as we come to you to waive them. So I did come to you a couple of years ago to waive, actually it was an emergency program, similar thing. On the emergency program, you can only spend $20,000. So I've asked you to waive that. Additional permanent lien, only $25,000. I've asked you to waive that. So it just.
Well, I just wanted to know how is this going to affect how many people? And what you're saying is that it really hasn't affected very many people at this point.
Let me make sure I'm answering the right question, because the ability to come back and apply for the program again and be able to spend another $25,000, that's already in the regulations.
Yeah.
It's just how that money gets treated afterwards that's changing. We want to make that an additional permanent lien.
Right.
So they won't be turned down. It's just the lien stays with the property for longer because they've already had a $25,000 declining balance lien and some money in a permanent lien. So this becomes an additional permanent lien.
And also about the emergency fund, you're right, I can't recall ever denying, but I guess it takes, weeks to come before the board to get this approved. And what you're asking for is, you would have the authority to address an emergency request up to.
Basically, in the case of somebody having, every time it's been a senior citizen.
Yeah.
And it's been usually winter, and it's often the heat. And just streamline that process to allow us to try to work out with them at a staff level that they make some payments on their sewer lien and try to bring that down is a quicker option for getting the heat reinstalled.
I don't recall very many people are coming before the board for this emergency act. So again, I don't see where this would be affecting that many people, but it would just allow you to
It's true that last year we didn't have a big issue with it, but it did happen several times in the 2 years
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, but this is just saving time when time is important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Other questions from other commissioners? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to amend the residential rehabilitation program requirements, including changes to the spending and asset limits, additions to permanent lien regulations for repeat projects, and changes to municipal lien regulations for emergency projects. May I have a second? Commissioner Gavin, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand saying aye. Aye. Seeing none? No? One no?
That was an aye.
It was an aye, I thought so.
You hadn't gone there.
No? Any noes? No noes? Thank you. The noes, and the ayes have it. Okay. So moving on to the second agenda item, which is in our packet on page 18. And this will be the first of two waiver requests. And on this one, I'll go ahead and make the motion starting early, and then we can discuss it. So consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to add $87,290 to the staff-approved expense of $50,000 for a total of $137,290 to bring a property in Ardmore to minimum standards pursuant to CDBG regulations. May I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. And Emily, would you mind running us through the first issue briefing?
Sure. So this is a waiver of the CDBG fund limit, and it's a request for the board to add, as you said, $89,290 to the staff-approved $50,000, which is the current amount. to bring this home in Ardmore to minimum standards. The home was purchased by Lower Merion Affordable Housing and will be resold to a first-time moderate income home buyer. It's part of the home purchase program. The house needs extensive lead remediation, new HVAC, electrical and plumbing, oil tank removal, new windows, new roof, and other interior renovations. At this point, we're finding it's really, really difficult to buy a house in Lower Merion for $250,000 or less that doesn't need a complete gut. So that's what we're facing in this case. It is a 3-bedroom house that will be resold, and we will get some of the funds back when the family secures a mortgage, and that will go back into our rehab funds and home purchase. Those projects go back, the money goes right back in to be used again.
Okay,
So that's,
thank you.
if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thanks, Commissioner O'Neill. Emily, just to clarify, this is in the home ownership program.
Yep.
So this is not residential rehab of an owner-occupied house.
Correct.
This is among the program where Lower Merion Housing Corporation buys, improves, and then sells.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's the home ownership program.
It is. The way we do this, we use rehab funds. We buy the house with one set of funds, and we rehab it with a different set of funds, which is why it falls under the rehab
Got it.
regulations.
And the same applies to the next one.
Same applies to the next one.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. This says to bring the property in Ardmore. Does this just affect one property? I'm thinking there are other, I know that we bought a property in Penwyn for rehabbing. Does this exclude other areas in Lower Merion, or does this just focus on
No,
Ardmore?
this just happens to be where we purchased this house.
Okay.
We did purchase one recently in Penwyn,
Okay.
which has been resold to a family of 5. They're very
Ooh.
happy.
Okay, well, yeah, you're just talking about a specific property. And when you said that when the new owners get a mortgage, that we would be getting some of our money back, how does that work?
So the family that purchases the house gets a mortgage, and they get a mortgage that they can afford. They work with Genesis Housing and get a mortgage that they can afford, so they're not house burdened. And that mortgage, the amount of that mortgage, the check actually goes to us instead of to the buyer, and it becomes program income, and it goes back into our CDBG funds, and we can spend it again on other things, but we spend it on the same thing. Basically, put it back into rehab and home purchase. It's also the program income that comes in from this is the thing that allows us to bump up our public service spending every year. So when we sell a house, that allows us to bump up our public service spending in addition to putting some of the money back into our programs.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought that the money that we spend for rehabbing, that's a lien on the property, and if the homeowners live there for more than 10 years, that half of it is forgiven.
So for the rehab program, we just put a lien on the property, and it's $25,000 is declining, and the rest of it's permanent. For the home purchase program, they get a lien for part of the amount of we sell the house at market rate, the family gets the mortgage they can afford, and then we put a second lien on the house, so soft second mortgage that is 25% is forgiven after 10 years, and another 25% is forgiven after 20 years, and the last 50% is permanent until they sell the house, unless they want to pay it off.
Thanks for that
Again.
clarification.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none. Any from the public, either in person or online? No? Okay. And so in that case, I'll go ahead and take the motion's been seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you. And then the third is similar, but a different property with a different amount. So I'll go ahead and read the motion. Consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to add $96,900 to the staff-approved expense of $50,000 for a total of $146,900 to bring a property in Ardmore to minimum standards pursuant to CDBG regulations. This is also in Ward 4. All those in favor, may I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gavrin. And, yeah, thank you.
Very similar case. Again, this is it's part of the home purchase program, like you asked before, so it will be resold to a moderate income first-time home buyer. It needs a lot of the same stuff that the other house needed. The lead remediation is not quite as extensive on this one, but it needs all of the other things. It also has, just as a point of interest, a large tree that needs to be removed that we don't want to leave there for the new owners to have to remove. And it has a sewer situation that I've never come across before, which is that the sewer in this house, it's a row home in Ardmore, and the sewer in the house goes right through the party wall into the neighbor's house. And it was originally built this way. We have all the stuff, I don't know who the plumbing inspector was then, but the sewer goes into the other house, and at that point, they both go out through the same pipe to the same clean out and the same lateral of the street. And so that's an item that was a big item that needs to be fixed that we were not aware of when we purchased the house, but I'm not sure how many other on the street have the same problem, but this one's going to get fixed. So just a point of interest.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion as read signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? Seeing none. The ayes have that one as well. And before I close, we did receive we received a comment that pertained to all 3 agenda items for this meeting from Michael Pollock, all in support of the motion. So, motions, plural. So, thank you very much. And that concludes this meeting.
Before we conclude,
Yeah.
should we have taken public comment from?
Oh, on the, yes.
Second, let's see if anyone.
Before we adjourn, does anybody in the public or online have any questions pertaining to agenda item number 3 dealing with the $96,000 funding request? Seeing none from our secretary. Thank you very much. And now that concludes the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Our last committee for this evening is the Sustainability Committee. I recognize as Chair, Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have one item on our sustainability agenda this evening, and that is in regards to potential budget amendment for sustainability reporting and a potential capital improvement project addition for solar panels. And we are going to hear from our Sustainability Manager, Paloma Villa, some details on both of those. And while she is setting that up, I'm going to make a plug for the Lower Merion Sustainability Ambassadors Program, which is mentioned in public comment this evening, so it is a salient point. If anyone is interested in furthering the cause of environmental sustainability in Lower Merion Township, you can go to thelowermerion.org and look for the Sustainability Ambassador Program. And with that, I see the PowerPoint.
Good stalling techniques. Good evening, everyone. As Commissioner Courtney mentioned, the topic of today's meeting is funding for sustainability projects in 2024. The draft 2024 operating budget and CIP will be presented to the Board of Commissioners soon, and any changes or additions to the draft budget will be considered by the board over the coming months. So tonight, what I'll be discussing are a couple projects that the committee may consider recommending for addition to the draft budget. So I'll present an overview of the sustainability projects that were agreed upon for 2023 and 2024 and their current funding status. And then I'll discuss 2 specific projects in detail. Then I'll summarize the impact on township finances and offer staff's recommendations. So you may recall, although it seems like 2 years ago, on September 27th, the Sustainability Committee provided input regarding the recommended 2023 to 2024 sustainability focus areas. The Sustainability Committee agreed with initiating these recommended projects to align with those focus areas. So funding for the projects shown here in purple has already been included in the draft 2024 budget. And then funding for the projects shown here in green have not been fully funded in the 2024 draft budget, and those are the ones that require further input from the Sustainability Committee. So that's what I'll be discussing tonight. So the first is a solar energy project at a township facility. If you'll recall, the township passed a resolution, the carbon-free energy resolution in 2021, which commits the township to converting its buildings to electricity generated from non-fossil fuel energy sources by 2035. And the resolution made a distinction between on-site sources and renewable energy certificates, or RECs, for energy produced elsewhere, which is currently our practice. So this chart shows the trajectory of what achieving that goal might look like if we were to use on-site solar as the primary method of electricity decarbonization. So essentially, we'd be looking to install about 415 kilowatts of solar capacity each year to meet 100% of our projected electricity demand with on-site solar by 2035. So the site that was selected to start transitioning our electricity was Penguin Library, and the way we selected that site is described in much more detail in the memo that's attached to the meeting agenda. I won't go into all of that tonight. But this table shows 3 options for solar photovoltaics, which I'll just call PV moving forward, at that Penguin Library site. So option A is PV on the rooftop of Penguin Library. Option B is a PV carport over the Manoa Road parking lot, which is located just behind the library. And option C is a combination of rooftop and carport at that site. And neither option is expected to result in loss of parking spaces or parking revenue. Again, there's more detail provided in the issues memo, but this table summarizes the environmental benefits and costs for each option. So the solar capacity line gives you an idea of how much each option would contribute to that goal I mentioned of 415 kilowatts per year. Annual GHG savings shows how much of the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the township's electricity use would be eliminated each year by replacing grid energy with PV. And 25-year GHG savings shows the accumulation of greenhouse gas emissions that would be eliminated over the lifetime of the system. The costs shown include what the township would be paying for the design and installation of the system, minus what we would be receiving in reimbursement incentives from the federal government and from PICO. It's broken down a little bit more in the memo, but what's shown here for the federal number includes a one-time allotment of funds that Lower Merion is entitled to as part of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. The CDBG allotment does have to be designated in early 2024, and funds that aren't allocated by that time are forfeited. So the simple payback value is how many years it will take for the electric bill savings and revenue from the sale of SRECs to pay back the initial capital cost of the system. And 25-year cash flow shows after that initial investment is paid back, how much additional funds will be available to the township over the rest of the life of the PV system. And that figure includes considerations for 25 years of ongoing maintenance costs, increases in electricity rates, decreases in PV productivity, and revenue from the sale of SRECs. Return on investment is a figure I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the ratio of the amount of funds you get back compared to what you put in. You'll notice that it says NA for option A, and that's just because essentially the investment would be 0, and so there's no investment, no return on investment. But basically, it's just pure savings and revenue for that option, and all 3 options have a really favorable ROI. So all that to say, in previous discussions about sustainability initiatives, we've talked about green premium, which would be the additional cost of choosing a clean technology over one that emits more greenhouse gases. In this case, because of EECBG and other new funding sources, it makes it possible to have a sustainability project with a tremendous environmental benefit while actually improving the township's bottom line in the long run. So there's no guarantee that those funding sources will be available for future projects, so it just really makes sense to use this opportunity to put us, maybe put us in a financial position where we can take on some of those green premiums in the future for situations where those greenhouse gas emission reductions cost us money instead of save us money. So with all that said, staff is recommending that the township proceed with option C. It presents the most significant contribution to the annual solar growth goal and the greatest elimination of greenhouse gas emissions over the life of the system. It uses the full amount of the CDBG allotment, and it has a reasonable payback period of 13 years. What's not shown here is every year this system will contribute $20,000 to the township's operating budget in the form of revenue and cost savings. So after we basically pay ourselves back for that initial investment, it'll add an estimated $297,000 to the township's balance sheet, which is an over 100% return on investment. So that's the fun one. The second project that's not currently in the township's draft budget and also requires discussion is an annual sustainability report. And the purpose of the report would be to share the township's sustainability accomplishments with the community, track our progress against the performance metrics that were identified in the sustainability plan, and encourage the community to implement sustainable practices in their businesses and homes. For this project, staff is recommending that we continue to leverage our existing services contract with Montgomery County Planning Commission to have them set up a template that we can then populate in-house. And that would be done through ArcGIS Experience Builder, which used to be called Story Map, if you've ever seen one of those really interactive websites. So that would create like a dynamic and interactive web page, which would house the annual report. And then once we have that template, we can update the report in-house each year. So including these two projects in the 2024 operating budget and CIP as recommended would result in a total additional township expenditure of $280,000. For the solar project, option C with use of CDBG funds, a budget amendment of $704,000 would need to be added to the CIP, showing a township contribution of $279,000 and all the remainder coming from outside funding sources. For the annual report, a budget amendment of $1,000 for MCPC services would need to be added to the operating budget. Staff recommends that the Sustainability Committee discuss the proposed projects and consider recommending budget amendments as appropriate. And as always, I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Paloma. So now we'll do questions for Paloma on this project, then public comment, then I'll put a motion on the floor for us. So, are there any questions on this one? It was pretty easy. Oh, Commissioner O'Neill.
Super easy one. Thank you. On the operating budget one, the $1,000, which seems like a wise use of funds to help report out on all the work and to kind of keep it manageable. This is something we can do with existing staff members. This isn't going to result in a new hire or anything like that, right? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. President Stein?
Yeah, just some, I think this looks terrific, but just some just data questions. So you had mentioned that there's an assumption that the electricity costs will be growing over the, so ballpark, like, I have no idea what the market looks like and what the forecasts are. Like, how much do we expect?
It was a very conservative assumption of 2% annual increase. As you know, we do our contracts in 3-year spurts, but it was sort of averaged over. And that's actually lower than what it has been in the last like 10 or so years, so it's conservative.
And then a chunk of this is selling electricity back to the utility, which is 2 degrees speculating on these, the value of what those credits are. Is that how this works? That you sort of get the...
We assumed the current SREC rate and not any increases in SREC rate, which we hope eventually will increase, but we just assumed this current rates.
Yeah. It's hard to know what they'll do, but seems fine to
me.
Okay.
The Pannoni did a lot of the estimates, and they took a very conservative route for the assumptions.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Stein. Commissioner Zella.
Thanks, Commissioner Courtney. Paloma, this is about a carport on the Manoa Road parking lot. Does that exist?
No, it would be constructing a
it's
canopy. Mhm.
It'd be a constructed carport
Correct,
over an existing parking lot?
correct.
Okay, and it'd be constructed to accommodate snow weight and other issues?
Yes.
And would it cover all of the parking lot, some of the parking lot?
It would cover all of the parking spaces, and then there would be openings in the rows for snow plowing equipment and things to get through.
And did you know how big the current parking lot is?
I don't have the exact square footage, but we have mock-ups of a solar.
Well, then I'll ask Commissioner Churchill.
I don't know the exact square footage.
No, but is this a 10 spaces, 100 spaces?
Oh, I would say it'd be 30.
Okay, it's behind the library.
Yes.
Yes, okay, I think I know the one.
I do
Great,
have an
thank you.
image of that if you'd like to see it.
Thanks, Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Commissioner Zella.
And I just-
Commissioner Churchill.
a point of information to commissioners. This parking lot is very unique. It was deeded to the township from the Presbyterian Church with the proviso that no parking meters. So this is, I think, the only free parking Lower Merion property. If we ever decide to put parking meters there, it reverts back to the church. So that's just, I don't see how that will affect our voting, but just to show off my historical knowledge.
Perhaps our savings on electricity will keep us from putting meters there. Commissioner Bernhardt.
Thank you very much. Well, I have one question. It's in the write-up that you gave us, and thank you very much for that. It states that the current draft 2024 CIP includes $60,000 to prepare the request for proposals for this project and for continued support by township engineer for future PV sites. If option C is selected, a budget amendment of $704,000 would be needed to be added to the CIP, showing a township contribution of $279,000, federal contribution of $407,000, and utility contribution of $18,000. Is this 704 on top of the 60 that exists?
Yes.
Okay, so if 60 exists and we're adding 704, tell me why that isn't 764?
So because the 60,000 is already in the draft budget, the amendment would be for 700,000.
Amendment 2, or are we adding it on top of the 60?
The 60,000 is really for starting to look ahead into other projects.
Okay, all right, so that remains, and this is like separate and apart?
Yes.
Understood. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Any further questions for Paloma? All right, I have one. This says that in terms of the kilowatts that we will be recovering, we're only getting 37% of our annual goal, so we are already behind if we're thinking linearly. What do we need to do to make up the rest?
So I think that thinking linearly is the key phrase there. I think in these early years, we've seen it with EVs, and we'll probably see it with solar, that we're going to probably start off a little slower as we kind of get our feet wet into these things, and then, you know, if we want to hit that 2035 goal, we're probably going to have to accelerate, accelerate installation. With solar, a lot of it depends on the age of the roof. We don't want to install solar on a 15, 20-year-old roof, so some of it's just timing, some of it's available space, available light, things like that. But that being said, all of that 415 is also with the assumption that on-site solar is going to be our only path to decarbonization. Right now, it's our best available path, but we are expecting other options to come forward in the future, and then we'll adjust our goals accordingly.
Great, thank you. And then on the Story Map website, that is a one-time $1,000 expense, but will the same website be used year over year?
Yes.
Great, so one-time expense in perpetuity. Awesome. All right, is there any public comment on either of these budget amendments? Please, this way.
I'll make this very short. Nancy Winkler, I'm from Anthony Farms, Ward 12. first of all, I want to thank you all very much for the work that you're doing to make Lower Merion such a special community and to ensure that we have a high quality of life here and are a place that people want to move to. And one of the things about sustainability planning is that it's very long-term thinking. And so being prepared to make these investments is something that will bear fruit for all of us who live here for a really long time. And I just want to say that I support the staff recommendations and am thrilled at the small amount of investment the township has to make to get such a great outcome. And had also wanted to make the same point that Commissioner Courtney just made, which is that if you look at that chart, we're way below the 2024 sort of goal. It looks to be maybe all the way up to by the end of 2024, we should be generating about 700, let's see, I've got to check the numbers, but 700,000 kilowatt hours. And this project generates about 156,000 kilowatt hours. So we are going to have to think big, and it is going to be a challenge. And at last, I'd just like to, as always, thank Paloma for the work that she's done on this, and I'm really excited to be able to support everything that the township's doing. The last thing is building energy conservation. We've got to be thinking about how we can use less energy. Just continue, not rest on where we are, but continue to seek ways to reduce our energy usage. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Blumberg, and I live in Wynwood. I speak on behalf of residents, particularly of children. Climate change is already harming communities around the globe, including Lower Merion. Many of us are blind to it, but it's happening. And climate change is the single most significant threat to our shared future. Confronting it demands all kinds of solutions, and all of us working together to build a different world, one that is livable for all of us and for future generations. I want to say, first of all, that I definitely support this proposal and at the C option, but one solar project is not enough. As Commissioner Courtney just said, we are below where we should be. We need strong, bold, and numerous actions. We are already behind in our efforts, and if we continue at this pace, we're never going to reach our goals. To me, it's embarrassing that a township like Lower Merion, with a significant sustainability plan, many residents who really care about it, only has one small project to offer right now. At this rate, we're never going to be able to transform our community to be sustainable. We need to rapidly accelerate the pace at which projects that significantly reduce our dependence on fossil fuels are brought online. These projects can include and should include putting solar panels on every township building, converting all township HVAC systems to heat pumps, making our present buildings much more energy efficient, and converting as many township vehicles as feasible to electric vehicles. The only way that Lower Merion Township can meet our climate goals, as well as help the rest of the world, which is in much worse shape, is to dedicate more staff and more budget to working on sustainability. Sustainability has to be what everybody is thinking about. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Ms. Blumberg. Is there anyone else in the room? Jody, do we have anyone online?
I don't see any hands raised online.
All right. We did receive some emails that have been distributed to the board, and I will give my summary briefly here. The Harrington High School Black Diamond team participating in the Oxford Climate Challenge wrote in support of composting initiatives and also praise of the Sustainability Ambassador program. Ethan Frank of Marion wrote in support of the solar panel projects and suggested using sustainability funding for bike and pedestrian improvements. And Michael Pollack of Ardmore also wrote in support of these budget amendments. So with that, I'd like to put a motion on the floor. Optimistically, I want to put both of these in one, but from a procedure perspective, Jody, is that okay if I put a budget and a CIP in one?
That's fine.
Awesome. Okay. Unless anyone objects. Right. I move that we recommend to the Board of Commissioners a CIP addition for option C in our packets, which is the construction of solar panels on the Pinwin Library rooftop and carport, and that we use our EECG, the remaining EECBG funds for to contribute to that for a total CIP amendment of 700. Somebody help me with that number. $704,000. And I also would like to amend our operating budget to include $1,000 for annual sustainability reporting services.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners O'Neill and Kramer. Is there anyone who'd like to comment? All right, this is great. On a quick personal note, 5 years ago, I asked many of you to appoint me to this position, and one of the ideas I brought up that night was that we would not only be carbon neutral, but carbon negative, and I am excited to see that what I meant there was that we would be able to produce more energy through solar panels and other items than we would actually be consuming, and this is the first project I've seen since that night that will do that, so I'm pretty excited, and I hope the rest of you are as well. So with that, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. One more item of indulgence, if you will. I got multiple emails this week of an article that was in the Inquirer yesterday, and I have a visual aid tonight. Gas-powered leaf blowers pollute air. This was yesterday's Inquirer. I won't read it to you, but I will recommend it, and there is a chart on B2 here. Montgomery County is the worst polluter in terms of leaf blowers and other lawn equipment. Really? In the year studied, Montgomery County's leaf blowers produce the equivalent of 1.5 million cars worth of particulate matter. To everyone who emailed me this, thank you. I read it that morning, and I would just say I spoke to Paloma about this today, and we will be reviewing an ordinance around leaf blowers and electric lawn equipment in early 2024.
Commissioner Courtney, can I add, since you brought that up, Jody has a copy of the article because I got it from her today, so anybody who wants a PDF of that article, it's available.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff, and thank you, Jody. Commissioner Kramer.
I have one question with regard to this issue of the leaf blowers. Are we also including something in the budget for next year to start the transition away from them? And to include potential
So
money?
I think we
So-
are like completely so far off of the
Yes.
agenda. And
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I respect
All
the
right.
question, but like,
I withdraw the question.
okay.
I think we will have an opportunity to address that soon. Thank you all for indulging me. Sorry we got a little off topic. This ends the Sustainability Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Courtney. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight. That concludes the business of the Board of Commissioners of Lower Merion Township for this evening.